Hello and welcome to this short video showing you how to use PFCLScan to scan your Oracle database for security vulnerabilities, and also to introduce PFCLCode, our new product that is aimed at doing static analysis and analysis of PLSQL in your database. You can buy a license for PFCLScan on its own, or you can buy a license for PFCLCode on its own, or you can buy a license for both products combined, which is what I'm going to demonstrate that installation today. So let's get started. So first of all, here's PFCLScan. This is version 3.9.68. To actually use PFCLScan is very simple, very quick, very easy to get up and running and scan a database on multiple databases. PFCLScan is project based, so you can create a project for a single database, or you can create a project for a group of databases such as a certain silo of production databases, or you can create a project for test or development systems, or anything indeed that you want to do. It's very simple to get up and running. So I'm going to do a scan today of a single 11G database because that's what I happen to have on a virtual machine on my laptop. So I'm going to first of all create a project. So this is easy. Click new project, follow the simple wizard, give the project a name. So I'm just going to call it test. Beside a project file name. So all of the results are stored in XML files, and there's an XML project. We don't have a database behind this. We don't want to have a database because then we'd have to secure that database. So it's simple. Choose a location to store the project. Click next. Choose a project template. So we have quite a number of different project templates available. I'm going to do a database scan. So this database scan does 1,200 checks against an Oracle database. The project workspace has been created. We can see here the connections. Obviously, we haven't created one yet, so I'm going to do that in a second. We can see the policies. There are 29 policies, and as I say, and 1,200 checks that we can test in a database. We have a number of pre-built reports that are attached to the project, but you're not limited to these reports. You can create your own custom reports, and you can run them against the results. Any report can be run at any time in the future. You don't need to be connected to the database to run a report. The report runs against the results of the scan. And obviously the last part is scanner executions, which we haven't done anything yet. So let's add a database connection. So I'm going to scan a LogG R2 database. It's just standard Oracle TNS connection details. We don't have anything specific or clever to connect to Oracle database. You just simply use an Oracle standard client or an instant client, and you just install that on your PC, or you copy the instant client into our bin directory. Very simple. So I'm just adding the standard Oracle connection details. The user that I'm going to use is called PFCLScan. This user has simple permissions granted to it. It has create session to allow it to connect to the database. It has select a dictionary, and it has select any table, and it also has select once it's not usable. So very simple privileges needed to run this tool. In fact, we deliberately created it so you can't run this tool as sysdba. So if you try to use sysdba, it won't work. We don't want people connecting to sysdba to do a security audit. So we can test the connection. So we connected successfully. We can start the audit. Very simple, very quick, very easy to get up and running. So this database that I'm scanning is a simple 11G R2 database. It's got a couple of applications in it. It's fairly simple. It's got in the low hundreds of tables and procedures and so on. It takes roughly 1 to 2 minutes to scan this database normally. If you scan something bigger, such as eBusiness Suite, where there can be an enormous number of database objects, tables, code, etc., and there could potentially be thousands or even tens of thousands of users, that will take longer. This is nothing to do with our tool, it's to do with the size of the database. So we're primarily looking at the data dictionary to understand the security settings in the database. So very simple, very quick. So this will be completed in a couple of seconds. We can actually browse the results as it's scanning. So we can go and look at, say, parameters. So we can look at the SQL92 parameter. This has failed, so we can see the value. So when the scan finishes, it resets to show the first check. So that's why the screen changed. So we've done a scan, very simple. Next step is to run a report. So the first report I want to show you is a single page score report. This report is great for management. So it gives a single page overview of the database and the security of the database. This is great to get a picture, an overview, and it's great for management to see the current state of the security of a database. Obviously, we can do detailed reports as well, and I'll show that in a second. This takes a couple of minutes, a couple of seconds to run because it's doing quite a lot of work in the background. Let me just minimize the ribbon so we can see the actual report. So this is a single page RTF document saved as a PDF. You can print this out, you can email it to people, store it easily, it's very small. So we first of all come up with a score for the database. So this database is 73%. We highlight the section that it's in, whether it's excellent, whether it's good, whether it's not so good, or poor. So because we're above 70%, it's excellent. If we were above 60% and less than 70, it would be good. If we're above 50% and less than 60, it would be not so good. And if we were below 50, it would be poor. And each of these sections would be coloured differently. So poor would be coloured red, not so good orange, good a light green, and dark a nice bright green. We've also split the issues that we've analysed into 8 categories. So patches, audit trail, passwords, hardening, vulnerabilities, user security, and data security. You can see for each of these sections individual scores. So the patches are scored 80%, and it contributes 2% of the 73% here. So you can see how each of the 8 sections contributes to the overall security score. And then in the third section of the report, we highlight the area that you could get the best benefit. So if you decided to fix all of the remaining hardening issues, then you would increase the overall score of the security of the database by 7%. And the second best gain would be by looking at the audit trail and get an overall gain of 6% if we fixed everything. And we also highlight the worst performing area. So 52% for vulnerabilities. So that's a detailed, high level report that managers love. Managers love to see this report. It gives them a really good single page picture of the security of the database. Let me just maximize the ribbon again. So we can run another report, which is the detail report. So we can see an overall detail. This is a HTML report. This again takes a few seconds to run because it's doing quite a lot of work. This report gives you a breakdown of the categories that have failed. So critical issues, high, medium, low, informational. It tells you the number of individual checks that's failed, and it tells you the number of individual errors that have failed for those checks. We also have the score again, and then we have a section for each individual issue. So if I search on something like password cracker, we can see the password cracker section. So if we look at this, we can see that there is a description of why each individual issue is a problem and also what to do about it. So let me just make that slightly bigger. So we can see here the details of the password cracking. So we actually cracked 74 passwords in this database, and we can see how they were cracked. So the sys password, the original 10G and lower password is Oracle 1 in capitals. The 11G password is Oracle 1 in lowercase. The password was actually created lowercase. We can see it was a dictionary mode attack. So the password is in a dictionary. We can see that there's also default passwords. We can see that there are passwords where its password is set to user. We can see how many attempts were made at guessing a password. So we guessed the diff password in 1 attempt. Also, this is expired lock. So the worst case scenario is where the password equals to the username and the account is open, such as these accounts here. So this means you could guess the password in 1 attempt, and no level of profiles or password management would protect against this. So let's look at one more report. So we can have a look at the privilege report. So we can look at the privileges that are assigned at a high level to users in the database that have been created by the customer. So again, just let me make that a little bit bigger. So we can see that an overview at a high level of the privileges for each user. So we can see the overblock user, which is a schema in my database, has 2 roles. Those 2 roles don't inherit any other roles. We can also see that at least one of them is an Oracle role, so connect or resource perhaps. We can see the number of system privileges granted via the roles is 9, and we can see that no object privileges granted. We can see that there are 4 system privileges granted directly, so a total of 13 system privileges. We can also see it's a schema because it's got tables and procedures. So this gives you a very high-level overview where you can compare individual users in the database and things stand out immediately. So the back01 user stands out because it's got 91 system privileges. So I'd be very interested to go and look at the detail of that and understand what those 91 privileges are. Or I could look at the AA user, which has got 895 system privileges. This is odd because there are only 209 system privileges in an 11204 database. This means that there must be duplication of grants of privileges. So that's some reports. We can also customize reports. So we can go in and we can say, just show me the criticals. So I can say select none, click run. This creates a custom report template. So we can go back to the standard report wizard and we can go and find the custom report template and run that for the current scan. And we get the same detail report as before, but now it only shows the critical issues. You can also customize and limit the number of policies that are shown. We can also customize and show individual checks. So we can easily, as a customer, create a custom report that matches what your internal Oracle security policy is. So that's a quick overview of PFCLScan to show how quick and easy it is to scan a database. I also want to talk about PFCLCode that I mentioned at the beginning. So as I said at the beginning, you can buy PFCLScan on its own, you can buy PFCLCode on its own, or you can buy them together. So what I'm demonstrating here is a build that has both products together. So if you go in and click on PFCLCode, it starts another application. PFCLCode is written using the core functionality of PFCLScan. So we're building on the stability and all of the features that are in PFCLScan. This makes it a much more powerful product quickly because we've already got the functionality of PFCLScan to build on. So the first thing to do with PFCLCode is to go and add the connection details. So I can put in standard again, connection details, and again the same user. We can test the connection, so it connects it correctly. So the next thing is to go and choose a schema that we want to analyze. So this is a static code analyzer. Well, this is unique. We're not just analysing the source code, we are doing that. We're analysing each piece of source code for vulnerabilities, but we're also looking at the context of that source code in the database. So I'm going to look at the Oracle schema, and we choose that. I'll come back to some of the settings in the rules and the parameters later. So we're going to analyse the Oracle schema. This looks at the security of the Oracle schema as a schema, but it also looks at issues at the schema level with all of the PLSQL code, and then it looks at static code analysis for each individual issue in the PFCL's code. So this is powerful. So it looks at not just analysing syntax of the PLSQL code, but it also looks at the context of the code in the database. So this is running a plugin which goes and retrieves everything from the database and analyzes it and presents us with the results. I'll show you the dashboard in a minute for a specific reason. I'll come back to the dashboard. So we can look at an overview of all of the pieces of PLSQL code in my Oracle schema. And this shows us the name, it shows us the schema, it shows us the type, so function, procedure, package. It shows us the number of issues that we've located. So for this particular one here, there's 8. It tells us the line count, it tells us whether it's definer or invoker, it tells us whether it's interpreted or native, whether debug's on, warning's on, and so on. All high-level detail for the code. The interesting thing is the graph on the left-hand side. This shows us a graph of the individual issues for each piece of PLSQL and split between the severities. So we can see, severity 1 is red, severity 2, so less critical, is orange, so severity 3, even less critical, is yellow, and informational is blue. So we can see this high-level view. If we pick on something at random, so we pick on this piece of PLSQL code, we see in the bottom half of the screen, the left-hand half of the screen, shows us issues at the schema level. So we can see that the Oracle schema, he's got about 74 pieces of PLSQL, but we've also analysed that he's got 32 tables. So this is a security issue because it shows there's no separation of duties between the code and the data. This means that it's impossible to grant privileges between the code and the data. We can also see that is a DBA. So we don't want the schema to be a DBA. We've also got checks further down to see if the account is open, which it is. We don't want the schema to be open. The schema should be locked. It shouldn't be accessible. It should be ideally a proxy account, and so on. On the right hand side, we show the vulnerabilities in the code itself. So we can look at things like, pick on something here, comments, for instance. So we can see in the code that there are 7% of the code is comments, and we've set a parameter that says any code that has less than 30% is an issue. So we want the code to be commented so we can see how the code works, and it helps developers work with the code and so on. We can also see if asserting is used, or fclose is a good example. So in this particular procedure, which you can see, we're using UTL file, but fclose has not been used. So we can see that the resource is opened, but never closed under normal processing, and it's also not closed under any exception handling. So this is a security issue because the resource is left open. If somebody's able to exploit this procedure and exit it, then the resource is open. They could perhaps still do something with it and perhaps read even more data from the file than was originally intended by the procedure. So that's a flavour of some of the issues in the code. So let me just go back to the settings for a minute. So we can look at the parser rules at a high level. So there's an individual settings we can control, such as the 30% of comments or the number of lines that we'd like to see for the maximum for a piece of PLSQL, and so on. We can also do naming checks. So for instance, for a procedure, we can decide here, these are the default settings, that every procedure name starts with pxf_p, or every procedure name ends with pxf_p. You can edit these and change these as much as you want. And we can check every single piece of code to test if it complies with these rules. There are also 240 rules at the moment built in. We can deliberately disable all the rules because I want to demonstrate the dashboard. And then we can choose something to enable. So we'll just choose one rule to enable initially. Let me just find something. Comments is a good one, I think. So we'll enable just the comments rule. And then we'll go and scan the code again. You can see the score originally was 3% because there's a lot of issues. 166 severity 1, 239 severity 2, and so on. When we scan again, we're going to see a comparison between the current scan, the one I'm doing now with only the comments rule, and the previous scan. Obviously, this is an artificial difference just to illustrate the dashboard. In reality, you would be editing your code, fixing it, making it better, and you'd want to see the progression of change and over the time period that you've been editing and fixing your code. So you can see here that there is massive change because we only turned on one check, which is a severity 3 issue. So the score has gone up to 33%. We can see the percentage changes. We can see the overview of the number of procedures and functions and so on. This gives us a good way of checking. We can also go in the comparison option. We could go in and we can check manually back to another scan. I mean, I've only done 2 scans, so we can only really compare the same thing that's in the screen now. But you could choose the earliest scan, so we could actually do a comparison between when we started working on our code and today. And if we keep scanning it many times a day, we can always go back and compare with a baseline as how we started, or a baseline that is good from when the code was perfect. And you can edit the rules. You can save your own rule set, so you can edit the rules and export that as a different rule set. Then you can reset the rules back to the beginning if you want to as well. So it's very powerful. The other things we can do is look at the privileges and the code. So we can open the code, very simple procedure, just a dummy procedure. We can look at the permissions. We can see a tree of the permissions, and we can see issues that relate to permissions as well. And we can see all the permissions granted to this procedure. We can also then change this to show this as a grid rather than a tree if we want to. And we can also show the dependencies. So we can see the up and down dependencies for each individual procedure. We also check issues in the dependencies and the privileges and report those for the individual procedures as well. We can also run a report. So we can run an in-depth report. This gives us the detail as a report, shows us At a high level, obviously we've only got one check enabled, which is the comments check at the moment. So we can see a high level report of any global issues and also the individual issues for each individual procedure. So that's a quick overview of PFCLScan, a quick overview of PFCLCode, and a reminder you can buy PFCLScan on its own, or you can buy PFCLCode on its own, or you can buy, as I've just demonstrated, the products with both tools available. If anybody would like any more information, please contact me on pete@petefinnegan.com, and I'll be happy to send to show any more information or to do a personal demonstration to show you the tools and where you can ask any more questions or more details. Thank you very much for listening.